I seem to
Do you
remember.
know what? Do you know what? I've bored people for at least about half an hour, I think, in this conversation, in our chat during lunchtime in the Royal Square. I enjoy speaking to you, Mike. I'm happy to talk to you again on a focus subject at some stage, if you like. But like everybody else in Jersey, I'm watching this government. What I'm looking for is a policy base.
Well, I've just been up, sort of a little bit of for the second interview I just did with the JEC, because they're planning on these generating from panels, electricity from panels. They got the second one up. They're talking about it up on the north coast, and it's quite interesting because it is trying to, because it was part of your portfolio when you were the minister, about alternative energy sources.
Well, I can comment on that. I was never keen on the JEC's preference for being able to create solar farms on greenfields.
That's what they're doing.
I was never keen on that, and I sought to discourage it. The advice I gave, and I gave it in writing, was that we should look in preference to the roofs of buildings, urban roofs, roofs of offices, warehouses and so on built structures.
Right.
We should seek to do that. And I also sought to persuade them that we should be looking for a decent feed-in tariff to encourage both the economic activity from the plethora of businesses that wanted to become involved with that. We could build a skills base for Jersey and provide financial benefits for the people who own those properties, that we should do that. But the evidence was clear that I was being told, no, the tariff is not sufficient to be able to do it.
Well, they're claiming...
That is why I did get a commitment there should be a review of that policy in the energy law, which I'd be very hopeful that is included in the carbon neutral roadmap, and I'm looking forward very much to the new minister and his team working on that to bring that about.
This is the second interview I've done with them, and if you watch it, the second one, it's concentrating on that. Why don't they, if they're going to build on these sites, which are basically very substandard from a farming point of view, if they're not really required in farmer, build houses on them and put panels on the roofs of those new houses, it won't generate it for the whole island, but it'll generate the electricity for those new houses. So in other words, I'm saying, if those fields are not really required for agriculture, build houses on them. What's the problem?
Well, I'm not sure. I would have personally not gone along with that, because I think dealing with our situation of our population and so on, and urbanisation of the island, I was never... Well, I am not still absolutely firm in my mind we should not go that way.
But you've got to house the people somewhere.
Well, I do think there's also the agenda of sustainable food. And I certainly find it difficult to accept that no land in Jersey has got a nil value in terms of its potential use for agriculture. For example, I was very strongly campaigned for more allotments, because I think people need to have more access to open space around the urban areas, the urban communities, and where we've got fields that are not in use, I'd like to see them go into allotments. So the New Island Plan includes policies that will encourage that, but of course that's not going to happen unless people willingly either buy those fields or seek to do so. So those are the lines: that sustainable food and having, looking after our soils and our land rather than treating it as well. We can cover over.
Well, I just think there's a greater value in the land than just growing spuds on it, or whatever they can grow on it.
Well, I disagree. I think agriculture is pretty well. It's so cold. They're so important in so many ways. So I'm very supportive. When I hear the new government tell us that they're going to support agriculture more because it needs it, I'm very encouraged by that. I hope they can actually deliver it.
The support that it needs is people with a shovel who are prepared to dig the ground, and they're not here. The people with the shovels are not here to dig the ground.
Well, that takes you back to the structure, to Brexit, takes you back to the whole business of what we ended up doing, cutting ourselves off for a labour supply, which is, frankly, when I think back now, I think was definitely a backward step. And I'm particularly interested to see how the UK's new Prime Minister, who was not in favour of Brexit, now magically transforms into a pro-Brexit situation, or perhaps a realisation. But I do note that George Eustice, who I think has now gone as the UK's Environment Minister, and my impression of him, and I got to speak to him several times, was that he was definitely a fan of the agricultural industry and
Right.
did his best. We will see, mate.
Okay, we better end there. But there's one question.